one thing I love about contemporary dance is the detail of the body.
Right.
Like in contemporary dance, it's so fine to spend 2 hours with a dancer just talking about when they're breathing in and when they're breathing out, or where they're looking at the time and what are they feeling and where's the movement starting from in their body. It's such a beautiful, and because I've got such attention to detail, it's incredibly frustrating for people, I think. But I think that's something I love about the art form.
Welcome to 30-Minute Call, proudly presented by the Canberra Theatre Centre, produced right here on Ngunnawal country, and we pay our respects to the people and elders of the Ngunnawal Nation. Yarn and hello, my name is Joe Gleeson, and today we have a great little yarn to choreographer Jodie Farrugia. She is part of the team working on Rebel, QL2 Dance's major project for 2021 for their Quantum Leap ensemble. Now, if you're not familiar with QL2 Dance, they are a contemporary dance organisation here in Canberra, and they do just an awesome job of developing the next generation of dance artists. In this episode, we discuss Jodie's creative process, we reminisce a bit about some of her old projects with a big smile on our face, and discover her rebellious side, which seems to be a pretty good fit for this show that she's working on. So let's get into it. Jodie Farrugia, this is your 30-minute call. Jodie Farrugia is a director and educator of theatre, dance and circus. She's made works for Legs on the Wall, Circus Oz, QL2 Dance, Contact Dance Company in Malta, Tas Dance International Institute of Circus Arts, Circus Monoxide, Deakin University, the Victorian College of Arts, and just a whole bunch more. Her work has toured throughout Australia and Europe and Singapore, Korea and New Zealand, and we have her on the phone right now to talk all things dance. Hello, Jodie.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm pretty good, thank you.
Jodie, dance or dance?
Oh, look, I'm more of a dance person.
Are you? Okay.
Than a dance person, I reckon, yeah.
We have in our office a pretty clear divide, as we have a lady from Adelaide with us, so it's dance, and she's starting to convert a few of us as well, so it's starting to become more dance in our office than dance.
Or dancing.
Yeah, yes. Jodie, what have we caught you in the middle of today? You're busy at home. You're a mum as well as a choreographer. I mean, that's
I am. Yeah, I've got 2 daughters actually, and we homeschool one of our daughters.
Oh, wow!
At high school, yeah. So you've caught me in the middle of homeschool day, which has been a really fun day today.
Oh,
so,
nice.
Yeah, we've got a pretty great life. We're living in Albury at the moment.
Yeah, fantastic.
Very, happy time in my life where I'm getting to make work and be a mum and enjoy simple regional Australian life, which is quite extraordinary. But yeah, so I'm pretty happy with where I'm at.
Good on you.
Yeah.
Well, it's a lovely part of the world, Albury Wodonga. It would have been interesting when COVID rolled around and some of this whole homeschooling stuff became real life for lots of mums and dads who had just never done it before. Did you find that people were sort of coming to you for advice and going, how do I do this?
Well, no, we only started this year, actually.
Oh, okay, right.
Yeah, for us, we're one of those ones where our youngest daughter, who really enjoyed the home learning last year in the COVID lockdown, she sort of really pushed for the possibility to be homeschooled this year. So this is our first year doing it, and it is very joyous, I tell you what.
Oh, good on you.
Yeah.
Fantastic. It was so funny because so many parents came out of that and went, I am not cut out for this homeschooling. Obviously a different experience for you guys.
Yeah. No, we're pretty up for it. Yeah,
oh,
for sure.
Fantastic. That's fantastic. So, Jodie, of course, you are one of the choreographers for Rebel, or this is another one that I'm going to ask you about. I've been switching between Rebel and Rebel, which are,
interesting. Yeah.
Similar, but
again, I'm a rebel. I'm a rebel person, not a rebel. Well, I guess I use the word rebel in the context of to rebel against something.
Yes.
Yeah.
So obviously, no matter how you look at it, it is a show about pushing for change and protest throughout the years. I'd love to learn a bit more about you before we get into the nitty gritty of that show and a bit of your story first. So I believe you have your own choreographic practice as well.
Yeah. So I've been sort of working as a choreographer, for about 20 years now. And also, I always had a choreographic practice going alongside my professional performing practice.
Right.
As well. I was always really interested in making, so I've been creating from, as soon as I graduated from Rusden in 96. So I would equally work as a performer for other choreographers and directors, and was also interested in my own sort of creative practice. And I guess I've sort of, I work amongst a couple of different forms in the sense that I work a lot in the circus sector as well, community, and physical theatre and dance. And I think the reason is because my background is in dance and theatre, and circus became a real interest for me as well, because it was another medium, I guess, to tell story or express particular ideas on stage, using non-verbal forms of creativity, which is either, the dance and the physical theatre and circus. So for me, I've really enjoyed working across all of those different art forms.
Yeah.
And often, there's been some special projects that's allowed me to bring all of those things into the one show. But yeah, I equally enjoy the contemporary dance, physical theatre and circus, creating inside those forms.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, you graduated from Rusden Dance and Drama College in Melbourne, and also trained as an acrobat at the National Institute of Circus Arts. So it's not just that you know how to choreograph circus, you can actually do it as well. Is that something that you...
Well, yeah, I used to before my children. Yeah. Actually, I worked quite a lot in as an acrobat as well.
Wow.
Mostly around, I'd done a lot of gymnastics as a child, and it came to me quite naturally after all my training in dance to a professional level. And then I was always very interested in partner work, basically, and group sort of group lifting and passing and things. And so when I first got interested in circus and acrobatics, it was particularly around being a flyer, because I'm quite little as well, quite tall and light back then, as an acrobatic flyer. So I spent a lot of time working for different sort of circus and physical theatre companies as an acrobatic flyer.
Yeah, right.
Which meant, and that kind of lends itself really beautifully, I guess, to my dance skills that I'd had at the time as well, because it was almost like contact improvisation gone to the extreme, with much more airtime, I guess. And I've always been I love momentum work and sort of larger sort of contemporary dance movement that kind of works with an evolving sense of momentum, which is very similar to acrobatics and tumbling as well. So I picked that stuff up really quickly when I was at NICA at the Institute of Circus Arts, and just it allowed me, so it sort of gave me so much more repertoire and vocabulary to sort of to work with. So yeah, I sort of feel like I do just think, to me they're all the same, like in terms of acrobatic choreography and contemporary dance choreography. For me, they're just all part of the movement vocabulary that I love working in. And it's more just about how much muscle body or tension you're having in your body at different times, to get those different that different movement vocabulary out on a performer. Yeah.
Is that a fairly common thing to find someone who is in that circus world to have a background in dance, or or vice versa?
Yeah, it's certainly becoming much more common now. Like, I think when I started, I undertook the very first training opportunity that NICA had nearly 20 years ago now. So it was before NICA had become a full-time 3-year course. They did like a pilot project that was only maybe 8 months long or something. And that was the project that I was part of. And I think at the time it was myself and one other dancer that got into that course. But now we're seeing so many more dancers transition into circus. As an art form and training, and I think it's because a lot of circus is using a lot of the contemporary dance conventions or choreographic, devices, I guess, to generate material as well. And it's fair to say, if you look at some of the French circus and the Canadian circus, a lot of it looks like contemporary dance. but just with their acrobatic level. And a lot of the processes they undertake are very similar as well. But yeah, I think that's sort of gradually happened over the 20 years that I've been sort of working in the field. Like I feel like, when I first started, there were fewer dancers that were interested in circus, and therefore circus had less resemblance to contemporary dance as it does now.
Jodie, you have a passion for community arts as well. You've established several youth performance programs for disadvantaged young people in Melbourne, including youth at risk, refugee and newly arrived young people. Yep. That must be amazing. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? Yeah,
for sure. Look, I'm a funny one. Like, even from my younger years, when I first graduated Rusden, I always had this real passion for, making high professional practice work, for theatres and companies. But I was always really interested in how theatre and dance could be used as a vehicle or a tool to help, provide, some sort of social change or some sort of give back, I guess, to more disadvantaged a community that wouldn't... I was always acutely aware, I've got to say, because I'm a migrant child myself. Right. My parents migrated from Malta to come to Australia. So I grew up in a very culturally and linguistically diverse family. Lovely. And I always, I think it was a real coincidence that I ended up in the arts, because I certainly came from a low socioeconomic background as well. And so, it was rather a... I always think about it as a sort of fluke that I ended up in the arts world, because none of my family had any capacity to be really, interested in that, or it is quite an elitist, privileged opportunity, for people to live cultured lives in high arts and theatre. And so I think I always had this real empathy for young people, particularly from diverse backgrounds, regardless if it was Indigenous young people or it was multicultural young people. And I always sort of felt like I wanted to spend a bit of my time making that a possibility for other young people. Yeah, right. And so, most of the work that I did was around founding and creating programs, because... and maybe it was part of me trying to be versatile as a young artist, to sort of going, how do you just earn a living out of this, And so I remember, I was so young and brave, I don't know if I do it so much now. I remember going into Yarra City Council, asking to speak to the youth workers and saying, right, I want to start a program for young people living in the high-rises and in the commission. Yeah, I know, right? It's sort of crazy when I think about it now. Yeah, and actually all of those things did eventuate. They were like, yeah, sure, great. Yeah. Okay, well, we could provide you with a bus, and you could go pick the, you'd run the program. And and I did that actually back then with Dance House, believe it or not, in Melbourne, which is totally a contemporary dance centre for kind of people that have been through tertiary or, really, I guess, it wasn't grassroots, that's for sure, as an arts organisation. Yeah. But we started programs there. I started a really interesting group at the language schools when the refugee background community young people first come into Melbourne. Yeah. They go to these language schools for English intensive. Right. When they first arrived, for at least the first 6 months to a year, and I started circus and theatre and dance programs, which was amazing because it sort of accelerated their ability to pick up the language as well and feel some sense of healing through whatever trauma they may have been through. So I've always been interested in that part of how dance and theatre can also be an amazing tool for either healing or teamwork or just building confidence. I also used to run an anger management program for young boys in schools as well, through acrobatics and circus. So I've always sort of seen it not only as an amazing tool on stage to communicate messages in a high art kind of way, but then also an amazing art form to learn and teach and bring people together. Particularly young people, I think, when the English language is a barrier, it's still a creative form for them to express themselves. So that's very cool, Jodie. It's crazy talking about it now, and I still do that now. I do that. I work with the newly arrived young people here in Albury. Yeah. Currently, in all sorts of programs, and yes, I've sort of taken that with me throughout my whole life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm seeing a movie being made out of this, Jodie, like sister act style, where you come in and like bring the kids together, and there's like undiscovered talents popping up all over the place. And this is
Well, I think a lot of it is, it's funny. Like, I think a lot of it is around privilege and ability to access training, without, and to be honest, I found a lot of these young people who wouldn't be able to necessarily afford to go to regular classes absolutely physically had the skills and talent, or whatever you want to call it, or natural facility to be able to reach high level in any of those art forms, if it wasn't for money and privilege that would make it impossible for them to do that.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit, this is going back a little way as well. Tell me a little bit about a work that you made called Collision. Do you remember this one?
Oh, yeah, I do, with the deaf community.
Yeah. So you brought together hearing and deaf dancers.
Yeah.
Tell me about this. I'm fascinated.
Oh, it was awesome. It's funny, as soon as you said that, the title of that work, a big smile came on my face.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, so that was me working in collaboration with a deaf choreographer in Melbourne at the time, and through Arts Access in Melbourne, which is a really well-established disability in arts sort of organisation. And we got some funding to work with 5 hearing dancers and 5 deaf dancers to come together and make a work actually for deaf audiences.
Wow.
So it was very specific around, how do we, it's not about creating a work just for hearing audiences, it's about actually also creating a work for either deaf or hearing impaired audiences. So that was really interesting on all sorts of levels. And we experimented with, the process in developing the work was interesting enough because we had, we really needed to rely a lot on interpreters, Auslan interpreters. We had to really work on just the connection between the dancers, not to be sort of held together by the sound or the counts. And of course, part of it was, we had to be really specific about finding the right dancers, particularly the right hearing dancers, because they had to be interested in really going into a sort of process and a performance style presentation that wasn't going to be kind of what we would usually expect. And we did some really cool things, like we had, speakers underneath the seating banks so that the bass could be felt. And we also used this amazing visual artist that we worked with that sort of created the soundscape, like almost like wave files, but a little bit more abstract projected on the back of the screen as well. So at least the hearing, the deaf dancers could visually get a sense of, in a visual way, how some of the sound was translating.
Yeah, right.
And then, of course, with the bass underneath the seats, they really loved that.
Yeah.
Yes, that was a really interesting work, actually.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Very cool. Jodie, this is really cool. For you, I can feel your, enthusiasm for these things and reminiscing about them. It's really lovely to hear that enthusiasm. I want to hear a little bit about your time at Flying Fruit Fly Circus. We're familiar with these guys, and you'd be familiar with the Canberra Theatre Centre because we've had them at the theatre a number of times. You were artistic director and co-CEO, I believe, from 2013 to 2018. How was that time for you?
That was amazing. Yeah, it was amazing. Yeah, I brought a couple of my large works to the Canberra Theatre, so thanks for having us quite a few times. Look, it really was amazing. And I had a relationship with the Fruit Fly sort of for 10 years before that as a guest choreographer and director as well. And so that's the reason we're living in Albury now. We relocated from Melbourne for me to do that job for 5.5, 6 years.
Yeah.
Look, it was really extraordinary. It was quite amazing. I had the opportunity to make some really great large-scale works with the company, and we did a lot of touring. The Fruit Flies is an amazing place. It's it's not only a training institution, it's a select entry training institution, I should say, but it's also an academic school from grade 3 to year 12. So you're sort of working with the young people from 8 years old all the way to 18, and it's such an amazing journey, I guess, to lead an artistic vision for an organisation like that, but more importantly, just to work with, I think at the time I was there was 80 full-time students. Wow. In that age bracket. Yep. So, it's sort of like you're invested in them and their families and for that whole 10-year period. So that was really extraordinary, actually. And I feel like I got to make some really fantastic work on a scale that, I'm not sure I ever will again on that, necessarily on that scale, but I was really proud of the work that I made while I was there, and really enjoyed my that period of my life. But it certainly was all consuming and very beyond full time, and so it was pretty. It was hard to let go of, but it was certainly it has allowed me as an artist to do a whole heap more interesting stuff. Since leaving there. And more so just focus on the art making part, which is the part that I really love.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
Let's move on to this QL2 work that we're going to see here in town, 20 to 22 May. We're not too far away. Rebel is the name of it. And can you tell us a little bit about this show to begin with, Jodie?
Yeah, sure. So the show is broken up in 3 parts. Mm-hmm. And it also has 3 different choreographers working on each of the sections. And it's broken up in under these 3 titles in terms of the word then, the word now, and the question when. So then, now, when. So the then part of the work sort of explores what has happened to date, what are some of the major sort of protest movements that's happened in Australia that's really made a difference and made a change. So that covers things from obviously women's rights to Indigenous First Nations rights to workers' rights to the LGBTQIA+ rights. So it sort of goes through all of those things. And then the second part of the work looks at the now, which is that part's choreographed by Jack, and the first section is choreographed by Ruth and Steve. Yep.
Who are the artistic director and assistant artistic director at QL2.
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah. And then I worked on the third section, which is the when as a question.
Yes.
So really my part of the work, I think there's over 30 dancers in the work. I should know exactly. I think it's 32 dancers. And we really explored the idea of, we looked at what does it mean to be a leader in order for any of those political movements or I guess protest movements to happen there as a leader. We really zoned in particularly on Greta Thunberg as a young person and her, and the young dancers could really connect with that.
Yep.
So what does it mean to be a leader? How do you put yourself out there? What happens when you're alone as a leader, and at what point does the tipping point when more people join a movement and make it becomes a momentous force, I guess. And then we really zoned in a little bit on the more recent. I couldn't not bring this story to the stage around the gender, particularly around the women's March for Justice stuff that's happened in the last couple of months, particularly in Canberra. So we looked at some of the gender inequalities and some of particularly the women's issues. And I think the young people really enjoyed that because it was sort of a conversation to have. We could really unpack it a little bit about kind of when, let's use the gender issues around, when are those things going to change? How does, and as an older woman too, with 2 young daughters, and as both male and female in the cast, and even for the young men to question around the idea of what is the masculinity and what is toxic masculinity and all of that stuff, and how do they all feel about that.
Right.
We sort of really pulled some of that stuff apart and I think the section of the work that I made, which is also the ending of the work, aims to sort of, just put those issues out there and then ask the audience, when will we see these changes, and will we see these changes, and when will they happen? So I think the young dancers have been through a really extraordinary process because they get to unpack all of those ideas with the different choreographers. And I've been coming back to Quantum Leap for the last 18 years, like with big gaps in between. I didn't come back the whole time I was at the Fruities. I was too busy. But every time I do come back to QL2 as a creator, I always walk away going, wow, that group of young people just have had the most extraordinary opportunity to unpack ideas. And, I think Bruce does a really good job to come up with the themes that are really relevant at the time for the young people. And, they get to not just unpack it through conversation, they get to then deconstruct it through an art form, and then, of course, present it to an audience, which kind of is that powerful moment where they feel like as young artists they can have a voice on stage. So I think it's a really, it's a really amazing work, and I think even though it's done by 3 different choreographers, when we watched the run through all together recently, it really does feel like an overall show. With some really meaty and relevant ideas for not just young audiences, but also us adults that that are in the room, and just like Greta Thunberg, young people that are putting it out there for the world that they want to inherit, I guess. So it's really interesting content up against the youth arts, sort of, young people performing and responding to that content is really relevant, I think.
You sitting with all your dancers and unpacking these themes and ideas and having that conversation, is that normally part of your creative process when it comes to choreography, like discussing the theme?
It really is.
Right.
Yeah, it is. Like even at the Fruities, it doesn't matter sort of where I work. Part of my practice has always really been interested in how do you work with the people in front of you that you have in front of you in the room.
Yeah. And
it sort of stems from the belief that I have around if a performer can understand the content or feel some sort of ownership of the content, that it feels sort of true to them. Not saying that you can't, bend that process sometimes to get someone to play a role that is of not truth to them.
Yes.
Is saying something else. But generally, as long as there is a shared value in what's being put on stage, I kind of believe I come from that kind of way of working, of going, how do we put truth out there? How do we put the lived experience of who's in the room? And I think that's why I'm quite interested in working with some of those other more diverse voices, diverse. Before we were talking about, if it is the deaf community or the culturally and linguistically diverse community, because I'm quite interested in telling stories that I think help create a more diverse conversation on stage and discourse amongst us all as people in the world. So that is very much my process. Usually I like to sort of come in with an idea and then sort of more so structure processes or structure, if you want to call it, activities or tasks in the creative room to allow the performers to be able to contribute, not just in the dance moves but also in the ideas.
Right, so it becomes a bit of a collaboration between you and all of your dancers after that.
Totally, right. And the older I'm getting, the more it's becoming like that.
Oh, right.
Because, I think it's because physically I'm less, able now in my late 40s to sort of, I don't come in with movements anymore. I used to come in with choreographic phrases where I would have spent days making them up and then teaching them on the dancers, and then we'd use them to sort of use those phrases, sort of rearrange and chop up. Whereas now it's like, I walked into this process with it not one move. It was everything that's generated in the work has come from the young artists.
Yeah, I'm fascinated.
Tasks that I've set, and or maybe there's a task that they came up with.
Right.
And something else I should probably say in terms of my work, I am really interested. I work a lot with props, and I think maybe that's the circus side of me coming out as well, where I'm not scared. I actually love a bit of props. I love it. Yeah. I love objects in the space.
Okay.
As well as the body. So in my work, I worked with hard books, like old encyclopedia books,
right?
And some sort of uniforms in terms of a primary school uniform, a secondary school. This is for the male dancers, a secondary school uniform, and a business suit.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so some of it has been, a lot of the choreographic tasks sort of responded to working with these props as well, or finding ways to give meaning to these objects in the space. Yeah.
Yeah, because I am fascinated about how that comes to life. I wouldn't know the first thing about how to begin choreographing contemporary dance, but it's quite interesting how at least that process begins.
The cool thing about contemporary dance, there can be any, one thing I love about contemporary dance is, yes, it is that there is a technique in terms of there's technical, specky moves that you can do,
mm-hmm.
Which all dancers love and appreciate and want to put on stage. But there's also, contemporary dance is also the pedestrian, and it's also the gestural, and it's sometimes it can be really subtle, and they're the things that make it beautiful. It could be about the breath and that a dancer uses as opposed to the dance moves they're doing,
Right.
So it's sort of it's such a I've got to say I have loved coming back to contemporary dance. Even though I still work in circus, one thing I love about contemporary dance is the detail of the body.
Right.
Like, you can really zone in. And you can do this in circus as well if the circus artist has the skills to draw on. But in contemporary dance, it's so fine to spend 2 hours with a dancer just talking about when they're breathing in and when they're breathing out.
Wow.
Or where they're looking at the time and what are they feeling and where's the movement starting from in their body. It's such a beautiful, and because I've got such attention to detail, it's incredibly frustrating for people, I think. But I think that's something I love about the art form.
Yeah,
and working with dancers that are trained in that way, and certainly the QL2 dancers are. And it's just really, it's such a privilege to work with such detail.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
Also, I feel like this theme works for you as well, Jodie. I'm guessing you're no stranger to protest yourself. I see that you've got a bit involved in the school strike for climate change, and that wouldn't have been your first role into the world of protest, I'm sure.
No, I'm right. I'm an activist for sure. Yep. Particularly around human rights and environmental issues. And again, I think that stems from my background as in my upbringing, and also in terms of seeing sort of what it means to come from a culturally and linguistically diverse background, and also a sort of lower socioeconomic background or a disadvantaged background, and absolutely have been following the environmental catastrophe for a very long time. So, right. I am very much into activism. I think it's really, really important. I think it's been a big part of my life in the sense of I do a lot of volunteer hours and work a lot with trying to bring people together to make sure we push for certain issues in Australia. And that's just sort of part of who I am. And, so it came quite, I was really pleased that Ruth asked me to be part of this particular work, and because it's something that I feel really passionate about. And I have loved what, me and my partner have been part of the school strike stuff here at Albury. We've worked with a group of young people to pull that together for the last few years. Awesome. And something I love about the school strike stuff is the fact that young people are really driving that and pushing that, and also learning the power of activism, which is something I thought for a few generations maybe had been lost. It's sort of compared to my, born in the 70s, where that was quite a normal part of, there was so much change that happened from the 70s, 60s and 70s. So it was sort of less in my radar, but I do feel like in the last sort of 15 years prior to the school strike stuff, in the last 10 years, it has been pretty numb around anybody sort of speaking up and pushing for anything. So yeah, it was quite inspiring for me when the school strike stuff. Kicked off.
Well, I don't know that they could have found a more perfect fit for this, Jodie. It sounds like a match made in heaven.
I really enjoyed it. I hope the dancers did as well. I think they've done the dancers have just done an amazing job at responding to the ideas that I brought forward. And I'm actually heading back up to Canberra next week to be there during the show time and help get the work into the theatre. So I'm really looking forward to, because that's such a special moment too. There's the making in the rehearsal space, which is great in the studio, but then there's the sort of magic that happens in the theatre, and then the beautiful exchange between an audience and your work and the performers. And my work, I should say, that is really another level as well.
Yeah.
So I'm really pleased that I'm going to be able to come to Canberra and be part of that time as well. Because that's the ultimate, that's what you work for.
That must be such a special moment for you. It's very, very cool.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Yeah.
Well, we will be there to check it out. Rebel.
Awesome.
Yeah, right. 20 to 22 May, right here at the Canberra Theatre Centre. Make sure you get along. Check out all three parts and pay close attention to that third part, because you've got a bit of insight into it now.
Enjoy it.
That when. So thank you so much, Jodie, for taking a bit of time out away from the kids. We'll let you get back to all that very important schooling. And we'll see you in Canberra very soon.
Awesome. Can't wait. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much, Jodie. Bye.
Okay. Bye.